The first time she said it, I thought she was talking about paperwork. But when Grace Whitaker placed the small cardboard box on the kitchen table and quietly whispered, "You'll need to help me separate these," I realized she wasn't talking about documents or old photos. She was talking about a life. And somehow, she expected me to help her pull it apart. Before we continue, take a moment to support stories that remind us kindness and second chances still matter. If you believe people deserve compassion even when life gets messy, please like the video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories like this. Because sometimes the smallest moments change the course of a person's entire life. The day it started felt like any other quiet afternoon in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Autumn had settled gently over the town, covering sidewalks with golden leaves and turning the air crisp enough to make every breath feel sharp and clean. I had just come home from work, exhausted from another long shift repairing heating systems around town. My life had been simple for years: wake up, work, come home, repeat. Nothing dramatic, nothing exciting, just quiet. And honestly, after the past I'd lived through, quiet was exactly what I wanted. I had been standing in my kitchen making coffee when there was a soft knock on the door. Not loud, not urgent, just hesitant, like someone unsure if they should even be there. When I opened the door, I saw Grace standing on my porch. She looked different from the woman I remembered from years ago. Back then, she had been confident, sharp, the kind of person who walked into a room and owned it without trying. She had been the owner of a small bookstore downtown, the kind of place where the floors creaked and the smell of old paper wrapped around you like a blanket. Now, though, her shoulders looked tired, her eyes looked heavier, and she was holding that small cardboard box. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. The last time we had seen each other was at a town charity event where we had exchanged polite smiles and awkward conversation. After that, life pulled us in opposite directions. Or maybe we had just let it. Without saying much, she stepped inside as if the house still felt familiar to her, even though she had only been here once before long ago. She placed the box on my table, exhaled slowly, and said the sentence that would stay with me for the rest of my life. "You'll need to help me separate these." Inside the box were photographs, hundreds of them. Some were faded Polaroids, others glossy prints from cheap cameras. They showed birthdays, road trips, Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, and quiet evenings that looked ordinary to anyone else. But I could tell immediately these photos had once meant everything to her. She sat across from me at the table, staring at them like someone staring at pieces of broken glass. That was when she finally explained. Her husband had left 3 months earlier, not with drama, not with yelling, just one quiet morning when she woke up and found his side of the closet empty. What hurt even more was that he hadn't left alone. He had taken their daughter with him, 8-year-old Maggie. The courts had given him temporary custody while things were sorted out. Lawyers had become involved, paperwork had piled up, and suddenly the house that once held laughter now held nothing but silence. Grace had spent weeks trying to keep everything together. But the memories kept getting in the way. Every room reminded her of something. Every photograph felt like a weight she couldn't carry anymore, so she had done the only thing she could think of. She brought the memories to someone who once knew how to listen, me. For the next hour, we sat at that kitchen table slowly sorting through her life. One pile for photos she wanted to keep, one pile for photos she wasn't ready to look at again, and one pile she simply pushed aside without speaking. The quiet between us felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. Outside, wind moved the leaves across the driveway like tiny waves rolling across pavement. Every once in a while, Grace would pause over a photo, her fingers tracing the edges like she was trying to step back inside that moment. At one point, she stopped at a picture of Maggie sitting on her shoulders at the county fair, both of them laughing under the bright carnival lights. Grace stared at it for a long time. Then she placed it gently in the keep pile, but the tears in her eyes never quite fell. What surprised me most wasn't the sadness. It was the strength. Grace wasn't asking me to fix her life. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She just needed someone there while she took it apart piece by piece. Night came faster than either of us noticed. The small lamp above the table cast warm light over the photographs as the piles slowly grew larger. At one point, Grace finally looked up and asked me something that caught me completely off guard. Why had I never left town? I shrugged, giving the answer I usually gave people: work, habit, comfort. But the truth was more complicated. Years earlier, I had lost someone too. Not to divorce, not to distance, but to a car accident on a rain-soaked highway just outside Des Moines. After that, I stopped chasing big plans. I stopped dreaming about moving away. Staying in Cedar Falls had felt easier than starting over somewhere new. Grace listened quietly, nodding slowly as if she understood more than I said out loud. Maybe pain recognizes pain. Maybe broken people simply recognize each other. Either way, something changed that night. The piles of photographs were finally finished around midnight. Grace leaned back in her chair, staring at the 3 stacks like someone who had just climbed a mountain. The key pile was surprisingly large, larger than either of us expected. When she noticed, she let out a quiet laugh that felt fragile but genuine. Maybe, she said softly, not everything needed to be thrown away. Maybe some memories were still worth carrying. That night, she didn't stay long after we finished, but before leaving, she asked something simple. Could she come back tomorrow to finish organizing the rest? There were letters, documents, and old journals she hadn't brought yet. I told her yes without hesitation, and that's how it began. Over the next few weeks, Grace kept coming back, sometimes with boxes, sometimes with nothing but coffee and quiet conversation. Slowly, piece by piece, she started rebuilding her life. She reopened the bookstore downtown after months of being closed. At first, only a few customers came in. But word spread. People remembered the warmth of that little shop. They remembered the woman who always recommended the perfect book. And slowly the place came back to life. One afternoon, about 2 months later, Grace walked into my house again carrying another small box. But this time, her eyes looked different. Stronger, hopeful. Inside the box were new photographs. Not old memories, new ones. Pictures of the bookstore reopening, pictures of neighbors stopping by, and one photo that made her smile wider than I had ever seen. It was Maggie, standing in the bookstore doorway holding a stack of children's books. The court had finally allowed weekend visits. Grace placed the photo carefully on the table and looked at me the same way she had that first day. "You'll need to help me separate these," she said again. But this time the meaning felt different. This time we weren't separating a broken past, we were organizing a future. Before the story ends, I want to ask something special from you. In the comments, write the word hope. It helps more people discover stories that remind us life can begin again even after everything falls apart. Months passed. The bookstore grew busier. Maggie's visits became longer. Grace's laughter returned more often. And somehow, without either of us planning it, the quiet space between our lives slowly filled with something warm and steady. One evening, nearly a year after that first box of photographs, we sat at the same kitchen table again. The stacks were different. Now, photos of road trips with Maggie, photos of the bookstore's anniversary celebration, photos of ordinary days that felt extraordinary simply because they existed. Grace looked around the kitchen and smiled softly. "Life," she said, "doesn't always come back the way you lost it. Sometimes it returns in a completely different shape, and sometimes that new shape is better than anything you imagined." If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who might need encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us hope is never as far away as it seems. Because sometimes healing begins with something as simple as a small box on a kitchen table, and the courage to start separating the past from the future.